Welcome to the assignment solution walkthrough. So just as a quick reminder, Diane had reached out asking for help creating a couple of new measures, right? She was looking for help creating total customers and return rate. Here's a quick solution preview. Up top, we've got total customers where we're using distinct count. And then on the bottom, we have return rate where I'm using a divide function here. It's probably a couple different ways that you could have solved the return rate measure, and we'll look at that using a function like divide or just an operator. All right, let's head over to Power BI and we'll check these out. All right, so from within Power BI, what I first want to do is talk a little bit about which column we're going to use to create our total customers measure. And we want to create a measure to show the number of distinct customers who made a transaction. And because of that, we want to use the customer key column from our sales data table, right? We're not looking to count all of the customers within our lookup table. We could count the customer key here to find out all of our unique customers. Because this is a lookup table, this customer key is a primary key and should be unique. For this case, what we want to do is count the customer key column from the sales data table. So we'll come in here, create a new measure, and we'll call this total customers. And this is going to equal the distinct count of our customer key, right? And when I start typing in customer key, we get two tables. Make sure to select the sales data customer key. We can lock that in. And then this is a whole number. Make sure to add in that comma, right? And then from here, we can drag total customers into our view. All right, let me remove a couple of these things. Retail price, quantity sold, right? And we'll add in total customers. Perfect, right? So now we're seeing number of customers that purchased an individual item from one of these categories. But if we look down here at the total, 17,416, we come back to our sales data table, customer key, distinct values within our customer key column is 17,416. Again, if you go and now look at the customer lookup table, it's different than what we have here, right? So that was kind of the key here, is making sure that you're using the sales table and not the customer lookup table. All right, so up next, we need to create a new measure for return rate that's going to be defined as quantity returned divided by quantity sold. Again, pretty straightforward, new measure, and this is going to be called return rate. And again, like I was mentioning, there's a couple of ways that you could approach doing this. One kind of pro tip here is if you start typing an opening square bracket, this is going to list out any measure within your data model, right? So it's a quick way to reference any measures when you're starting to type stuff out. So here, we're going to go down to quantity returned. I hit tab. I can then use an operator like divide, and then another measure, quantity sold, and I can lock this in. And because this is a return rate, we want to format this as a percentage. And then we'll leave the default decimal places to 2. All right, so here, add in our return rate column. And now you can see return rate by different category. Now, like I said, there's a couple different ways that you could calculate return rate. One of the functions that we saw was a divide function, right? And divide is very handy in cases where there's a divide by 0 case. So let's do this. So if we start typing in divide, quantity returned is still going to be our numerator, but instead of using this divide operator, we enter in a comma. Our denominator is quantity sold, and then we can actually add in an alternate result here, for something like no sales. So in cases where you're trying to divide by a 0, or there's some error, we're going to return no sales. So we'll lock this in. And again, no update to our return rate value here, because again, we're just using a function to determine return rate instead of that divide operator. All right, so with that, that's going to wrap up this solution walkthrough.